Hi book friends! Welcome to my February reading wrap-up. I've read 7 books in the month of February, which is kind of insane because usually I'm like a 4 to 5 book a month reader. I don't know what's happened in the last couple months where now I've just been consuming more books consistently. I think 6 in December, 6 in January, and now 7. You know, I think that my consumption of books also tends to line up with my mental state at the time, to be quite honest, and we're not going to unpack that. But I do tend to read more when I am not in the best mental headspace. So I guess that's kind of a win, sure. February has been a good reading month for me. I've enjoyed a good chunk of the books that I've read. I did DNF a book this month though. That's so hard for me to do. It's one of the areas that I'm trying to grow as a reader though, is to just DNF books if I'm not enjoying them. There's so many books out there that I want to get to that spending my time reading a book that I don't enjoy doesn't really make a lot of sense. Thus, I'm DNFing. Starting out the month, I began my Brandon Sanderson journey. I know a lot of people start with Mistborn. I chose not to. I wanted to read a series of his that was not interconnected to the Cosmere, purely just so I could understand what his writing style was like before jumping into his bigger series books. And if you see my YouTube short, I talked about how I bought this book because I thought the character looked really cool and the premise of the story sounded fun. So I actually own the first 3 books of this series before I'd ever even read them, which is again very unlike me because normally I wait to buy shelf trophies until I read the book. Who am I becoming this year? I'm gonna say that it's a positive though, so whatever. Quite honestly, I really enjoy this book. I think that if you like books with space themes, think maybe Star Trek, Star Wars, intergalactic type of feeling, then this is a good series for you. Wanna know one thing I didn't like about this book though? And no hate for my short queens out there, but the main character is 4'9". That's crazy, but it would make her a better pilot because she would be more compact in the ship. So it fits her role. The ending of this book was not at all what I was expecting. I had a feeling that something was off while reading some of the prologues before starting each part, but was not expecting that. Also, I think that it's really cool that before you start a new part in the book, this is not a spoiler at all, it shows you what the ships look like, which I thought this was actually really cool and helped with visualizing the story a lot more. You can also tell that I read a lot of enemies to lovers, romanticities type books because 2 of the characters in this book, the entire time I was like, they're gonna have to get together because they hate each other. I don't know what's wrong with me, but anyways, I recommend this book. I thought it was good. How could I not talk about these 2 books? Honestly. If you have not read the Crimson Moth duology, what are you waiting for? These are such bingeable books. I had a reread of Heartless Hunter. I read this last year. Wanted to reread it before Rebel Witch came out this year and enjoyed it so much more. I was able to pick up on more things that I didn't the first time around and just really enjoyed this book. I also got my sister-in-law to read it and she also very much enjoyed it. So I always feel like it's a win when I recommend a book and somebody else actually enjoys it. But dare I say that Rebel Witch was better. I was crying reading this book. Like it elicited so many emotions out of me that I was not expecting to feel. Like I was sad on some parts during Heartless Hunter, but I was sobbing during Rebel Witch on parts. Just the way that they each confessed their love to one another. I was at a loss for words. And in my previous reading vlog, you can watch me crying while reading those parts. Kind of embarrassing to put that on the internet, but here we are. Books that I don't own in physical format that I did read this month, and I read them on my Kindle. My baby, honestly, I read majority of my books on here. And I feel like I consume them so much faster than if I read them in person. So, I read The Kiss of Deception, which this was a book that was on my 25 books in 2025 that I wanted to read. I was told that this trilogy is good to read before Dance of Thieves because it helps to build the world out more so you understand Dance of Thieves better, which is the reason why I read it. It's definitely more on the YA side of things, which I think that there's nothing wrong with a good YA. Honestly, some of my favorite books are YA. It was good in the way that it was just easy to consume and I finished it also in like 2 days. I went on a crazy reading streak before Rebel Witch came out and I think I read 3 or 4 books before it was released. Again, that's just not something I do. I feel like I need to start making myself like my own awards for these accomplishments, truly. Wow. I feel like I need to actually just start talking to more adults and like people more often than just like my kid and my dog. And anyways, here we are. But it's definitely YA, meaning that you can feel how young the female main character is. Leah is 17 and you can just feel that she is 17. There's just certain aspects of her internal dialogue, how she looks at the world is young. But as the book progresses, you can see how that starts to change as she goes through more hardships and she's just thrust into a lot of situations that no 17-year-old really should be. A lot of different characters with a lot of layers to work through. And I appreciate each one has their own little story going on. And that helps to really bolster the actual plot of The Kiss of Deception. While reading this entire book, I couldn't decide which male main character I was rooting for, if it was Rafe or if it was Caden, because they both had aspects of them that were like, yes, Leah, choose him. No, choose him. Wait, no, choose him. I also really enjoyed the addition of the songs and the poems and journal entries that are from long before Leah's time, because they help to just add this different component to the story, as well as while you're reading them, you're starting to theorize like, okay, how does this actually play into the bigger story and the bigger plot? I think that the second book should have been called The Kiss of Deception, because the way my girl Leah was out just kissing people and making them think she actually liked them was crazy work. I think that the love triangle was starting to get a little drawn out in this book, but in a way it wasn't even really a triangle, because one person just thought that she was into them and she was not into them like that. And so I don't know, that's not really her fault. Is that a love triangle? I don't know. Rape still wins my heart personally. I noticed that there's a lot of moments in this book where Leah has a lot of similarities and parallels to Venda. You hear about her in the first book, and I don't think that's gonna bode well for her. I can't wait to finish this trilogy. I'm going to finish it in March. Right now, this trilogy is sitting around a 3.75, 4-star rating, in my opinion. Plot's pretty easy to follow, and I like any series or any book where I can start to form theories early on and see if they're actually gonna play out, and just like highlighting things and being like, this connects here and here and here. I feel like a detective when they have that big board behind them that has like all the lines connecting everything. That's how I am when I read books, especially fantasy books. I listened to Greenlights by Matthew McConaughey on Audible this month. I'm trying to be better about reading books that are not just fiction. One of my goals for the new year was to read more nonfiction books. Gosh, why is that so hard to do? It's one of my goals, so we're trying. Memoirs are one of the few types of writing that I prefer to listen to, because it almost feels like I'm listening to a podcast, and I love consuming podcasts. And I would recommend that you listen to Greenlights so you can hear Matthew McConaughey actually talk about his life. I just feel like you approach the book differently when you listen to it versus if you're gonna read it yourself. I was not expecting this book to be the way that it was. To have such a tumultuous upbringing as a child and still come out as such a relentlessly positive person feels like an enigma. To hear him talk about abuse and abuse-like situations in his childhood with so much calmness was very jarring at times. I found myself listening and just thinking, there's no way. And then to still have such an amazing relationship with both of your parents throughout all that. I don't know. That's like such a tricky road to go down. I don't even want to complete that thought. I don't know. It's just like, if one person doesn't feel like they're a victim, should we still look at them as if they were? It's weird. Like I said, like as you're listening to him talk about it, you are feeling a lot of feelings. I think that it's worth a listen. I also really enjoyed hearing where his all right catchphrase came from, and it was not what I was expecting. I did not realize that that was just made up on the spot. There is one part in the book that I highlighted and I wrote down immediately because I thought that it was so relevant to just the world that we're living in now. It was when Matthew McConaughey was talking about while he was in Africa and he was traveling with these two men, and he was listening into one of the discussions that they were having. And when Matthew McConaughey went to give his 2 cents on the situation, one of the men stopped him and said, it's not about right or wrong, it's about if you understand. And essentially it's saying like, we're not trying to prove one person right or one person wrong. It's about understanding where that person is coming from. And I just felt that that was so deep and so relevant to the climate of the world that we're living in right now. We're very quick to judge, but not so quick to listen. The final book that I read this month was A Staircase in the Woods. And this was the book that I DNF'd. I received an ARC of this book, so it doesn't come out until April. But it just was not the book for me. It's not necessarily a book that I wouldn't recommend to others. I think that if you like suspense, some darker themes, it could be a book for you. I made it 30% of the way in before I was just honest with myself and said, I'm not really enjoying reading this book. I feel like it's a chore to finish it. And so I'm not going to. The very beginning of the book hooked me in, but just as I continued to read each chapter, really starting to lose me. I always feel really bad when I don't finish an arc or I'm not enjoying it and can't rate it as well. I feel like I'm like letting the author down or something. And I know that's not the case, but just something about my people pleasing, feel so guilty for it. I wish that the book would have followed all 4 perspectives rather than only 2 perspectives of the friends. And quite honestly, it would have been interesting to see other characters' point of view. I didn't really care for the 2 friends that were chosen. I wouldn't have minded reading some chapters from them, but having all of it, I just didn't necessarily care for. Again, I say all of this with a grain of salt. This book might be for some of you, it just wasn't for me, and that's okay. I cannot wait to get into my March reads. I am itching for a 5-star read. I'm really fingers crossed that I'm gonna get one this month. I'll at least have one per month. I just did it in February. Rebel Witch was really close. Honestly, part of me is like, maybe I changed that rating because I keep thinking about the book. But it's sitting at a 4.5 right now. But I'm hoping I can get a 5-star read in March. I hope everybody else had a good reading month, and I cannot wait to see you in March. Happy reading!